All right, it's time for math class. Trimester 2, everybody. We're in Unit 4. Lesson 4-1 is where we're starting. Turn in your books to page 151. 151. The first page is going to be review. Review of things we learned last year. We have lines and angles we're talking about, and we're first going to review what a ray, an angle, and a line are, and then we're going to review, so we got these three in a group, and then we're going to review perpendicular, parallel, and oblique. Now, oblique is probably the one new one for the day, but we remember ray as a line that has a starting point and continues on in one direction and one direction only through another point. Okay? Number 2 is a ray. Ray CD, and notice how they put the line with no arrow on one side and one arrow on the other side. A ray starts at one point and continues on in one direction forever. Okay. Next one would be an angle. An angle is where we have two rays or two lines that intersect and they create an angle. An angle is here. Number 3 is an angle. We have the angle PQR, and they have the angle sign. Angle PQR. Okay, and the other one is a line. A line goes in both directions infinitely, it never stops, and we have to at least label 2 points on that line. So we have line AB. Number 1 is line AB. So we have a line infinitely in both directions. Line AB. We have a ray, starts at C and goes through D and continues forever in that one direction. And we have angle PQR. 2 line segments or rays that meet at a point and create an angle. All right. Now we're going to look at 4, 5, and 6 and look at perpendicular, parallel, and oblique. Let's look at number 4. Number 4 has 2 lines, line LM and line YZ. They're going in the same direction. They're never going to cross, so we call them parallel lines. 2 lines that never intersect or never meet. Number 5, we have line GH going left to right. We have line IJ going straight up and down. They cross, and where they meet creates a 90-degree angle. When 2 lines meet and make a 90-degree angle, they are perpendicular. Now, this should all be reviewed from last year. You should remember what a line is, a ray is, and an angle. If not, you had just had a good quick reminder. And we know parallel lines and perpendicular lines. Okay? The other word we didn't learn last year is just describing 2 intersecting lines that don't create a perpendicular, don't create a 90-degree angle. They create other angles, and we call those oblique. It's a fancy way of just saying intersecting lines that don't make a 90-degree angle, but they do intersect. Okay, so we've got all those identified now. All right, now look down at the bottom of the page. It wants you to create a ray for number 7, an angle for number 8, a line for number 9, but it gives you ray QC, so you have to actually put the point and label it as well. So draw a ray, draw an angle, draw a line. It says use your ruler. You've got the grids there, so you can just draw nice and straight lines. With the grid there, you don't need your ruler. If you'd like to use your ruler, you can, though. Draw a ray for number 7, an angle for number 8, a line for number 9. Draw 2 perpendicular lines, ST and JK for number 10. 2 oblique lines, FT and UO for number 11, and 2 parallel lines for number 12. Go ahead and pause your video and do this now. All right, now your lines and rays and angles will all look different, but here's an example of what some could look like. Okay, from the book, here's an example of ray QC, angle DXV, line EU. Make sure you drew the right type of figure, whether it be a line, or an angle, a ray, perpendicular lines, oblique lines, and parallel lines. All right, now we're ready to move on. If you want to look at this longer, pause your video, but we're going to move on to page 152. New skill. We're going to learn how to use a protractor today. Protractor is a device that allows us to measure angles. Now it's actually, when they build one protractor, they build two in one. We can measure an angle, like is set up here, that is facing to the right. Angle ABC, the angle faces to the right. Okay? So when I look at the line B, or ray BA, it's down along here. It's perfectly straight and it goes this way. There's point A, there's point B. Notice point B, the point where the angle is created, is put right in that center spot, right in that dot. And that line AB is perfectly along that bottom line. If I erase this line now that I drew, you can see that right through here, that's right perfectly on that line and goes through the 0 and the 180 line on the protractor. Now the bottom line that's along the bottom, we're going to use the 0 or the bottom numbers to measure angles measured to the right, that start to the right. We have, it counts up for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 65, plus one more is 66 degrees, and they've shown that this angle measures 66 degrees. Okay, it's very important to line up that line, again, on the bottom, down here on the bottom, line up this bottom line perfectly in the dots and along that bottom line in your protractor. Then we use the other line to measure the angle. Okay, another thing, here we have 90 degrees. Is this angle acute or obtuse? If we know it's acute, we know the measurement has to be less than 90 degrees, so we know we're going to use these bottom numbers because an acute angle is going to be less than 90 degrees. Now, if it were more than 90 degrees, if that black line extended out here, a straight line, as straight as I can make one, and we had this angle, this line angle that I just drew right now in darker black, that would be an obtuse angle, and we know it would be more than 180 degrees, so we would use those numbers more than 90 degrees because we know it's more than a right angle, it's an obtuse angle. Okay, that's how we use a protractor. We're going to practice this now. So look at the bottom page 152, and there are 4 angles here. Okay, this is the part you might need some help on. But you might have to turn. Notice they don't. The number 13 has the angle nice and flat on the bottom and angled up. Put your protractor down just like the picture above. It's going to be very similar in how you measure it, but it's going to be a smaller measurement than the angle on the top. Okay, for the other ones, for 14, you may have to twist your book because you've got to put that bottom line, one of those lines, along that bottom part of your protractor. Okay? If you need any help, raise your hand and I'll come around and help you with the protractors, but measure 13, 14, 15, and 16 in your book, and we'll talk about the answers in a moment. Pause your video and measure these angles. All right, let's check these measurements. Now your measurements might not be exact, and that's okay. Kind of difficult to measure angles sometimes. So we're going to look at this. We've got number 13 was 45 degrees. Notice I put that little degree sign. It's a little circle, little 0, but very small, up kind of where we put the 2 for squared, centimeter squared, and the 3 for cubed. So same way, but it's a little circle for degrees. Number 14 is, in fact, a 90-degree angle. We could make this a box right here when you measure it. Okay. Number 15, 131 degrees. Now, as long as you're within a couple degrees, you measured it well. It's hard to get exactly right, especially with these smaller angles in the book. But as long as you're within 4 or 5 degrees, you set up your protractor right, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, and number 16, 19 degrees. All right. Pause your video if you need to. Recheck and see if you got them wrong. Remeasure and see what you did wrong. But you should know how to use a protractor now after this part of the lesson. Pause your video and then we'll move on. All right, we will get plenty of practice with the protractor, so don't worry. But we're going to move on to learning about vertical angles. So turn to page 153. Okay, these two words here are virtually, this is defining the same thing. Opposite angles are vertical angles. Okay, when you have two opposite angles, which means angles on the opposite side. So angle CBE, this angle here, is on the opposite side of the intersection as angle ABD. Also, when you have two lines intersect like this, you have two more sets of opposite angles, ABC and DBE. So we have the two that I drew in red. Those two angles are opposite angles, which means they are vertical angles. One of the things we know about vertical angles is they have the same measure. Okay? So they're the same, and also the blue angles, ABC and DBE, are also the same. Okay? Vertical angles. The other interesting fact about them is when we add all of these together, this angle plus this angle plus this angle plus this angle always equals 360 degrees, because we're starting at one point and going all the way around and finishing here with our angles. A circle is 360 degrees. Okay? So know that opposite angles are on the opposite side, and we also call opposite angles vertical angles. Their mathematic name is vertical angles. All right. Hopefully those ring a bell. Opposite and vertical angles, same thing. And opposite and vertical angles, the opposite angles both have the same measurement. Vertical angles, so the same by the same accord. Opposite, the vertical angles have the same measurement. Now we're going to jump into one more thing, page 154. All right, here we're going to talk about complementary and supplementary angles. In a nutshell, complementary angles mean they add up to, oops, I kind of drew over the 90-degree line there. Complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. Okay, two angles, so when you put them together, they add up to 90 degrees. Or when you place them together, they create a 90-degree angle like here. Okay, so we've got one angle here and one angle here, and they add up to 90 degrees. Okay, in this case, if this one was a 30-degree angle, and this was a 60-degree angle, they add up to 90 degrees, so we can say these two angles are complementary. Together, they make an angle that's 90 degrees. Okay? Now, supplementary is when we have two angles that add up to 180 degrees, and they would create a straight line. Okay? 180 degrees, straight line. So if this little angle was 30 degrees, and this larger angle was 150 degrees, we add them together and they add up to 180 degrees, so they are considered to be supplementary angles. They create a straight line across the bottom, okay, or 180 degrees. Okay, just labeling certain type of angles. Two angles together that add up to 90 degrees are complementary. Two angles that add together to be 180 degrees are supplementary. Let's look at the bottom of the page now. We have groups of angles here. From these groups, you're going to, number 25, name two straight angles. Which two of these sets are straight angles? You're going to label them by their angles, so you have to use the letters. Okay, so one of them are 25, to get you started. This is a set of straight angles. Straight angles are also supplementary angles, or make angles that make a straight line. So we have angle NHS and angle SHF. Okay? Now name another group that makes straight angles. Now for 26, you're going to name two pairs of complementary angles and two pair of supplementary angles. Again, remember, complementary angles add up to 90 degrees, make a 90-degree angle, and supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees, or are also straight angles. They make a straight line. Pause your video and complete 25, 26, 27 now. All right, let's see how you did. All right, here we have the answers. Two pairs. If you get the letters in different order, but you have all the letters involved in the angle, that's okay, as long as they're both there, and they can be in either order. So see how you did with the two straight angles. The straight angles, notice, are NHF, the two angles that made a straight line. That's how they labeled them, rather than I did it NHS, the two angles there, and then that would be that one, and then DBX would be this one, which you could have labeled DBR and RBX as well. Okay? All right, I think we're ready. If you need more time, pause your video, but we're going to move on. It is time to assign homework. And remembering 4-1. Right, you will not have to use a protractor on the homework. It's more about just all the angles and definitions. So feel free to go back as you're doing the homework to review the parts of the video, or go back to your book and review lots of vocabulary here. So don't feel bad about having to go back. Good luck. Do your best. Homework and remembering 4-1. Do your homework, get it done.